So in the previous video we saw cellular respiration, and we saw that you can create energy from glucose while breaking it down and yielding the electrons and the different molecules that are the products of glucose through glycolysis, the link reaction, and cellular respiration, the Krebs cycle itself. Now photosynthesis is a bit different. Photosynthesis usually occurs in plants, but in many different algae, for example, and different bacteria as well. Photosynthesis is the creation of glucose, the creation of carbohydrates from different smaller molecules. Now, plants and organisms that can do photosynthesis are called autotrophs. Autotrophs because they can create their own food. And by their own food, they can create their own carbohydrates. The general equation, after you read the notes I wrote when it comes to this course, the general equation for the photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight, which is the energy on the one side, and the products are carbohydrates and oxygen. Oxygen is very important because basically oxygen is what we are going to use on the planet. So plants and organisms that can take carbon dioxide and give us oxygen are very beneficial when it comes to the ecosystem, of course. This is why we are afraid of climate change, and this is why we plant more trees in order to fight climate change, because of this chemical reaction. The photosynthesis can take carbon dioxide and give us oxygen. Now, if we go in more details into the equation, you will see that X number of carbon dioxide plus X number of water plus photons, which is light, and we are going to study on it very, very soon, gives you the basic unit of carbohydrates, which is C1H2ON plus X amount of oxygen. You should know by now that this is the basic formula when it comes to glucose and carbohydrates. You are going to have one carbohydrate, 2 hydrogen, and 1 oxygen, and it's going to just repeat itself. This is the definition of carbohydrates. Now, the photosynthesis is basically divided into 2 main steps that we are going to study: the light reactions and the dark reactions. And for the IMAT and BMAT exam, it is very important to know that dark reactions, the name is very misleading, because dark reactions is not something that occur in the dark. Dark reactions also dependent on the sun, but they are not directly dependent on the sun. So while the light reactions are basically going to be, and they are going to need the direct contact with light in order to continue, the dark reactions, or the more appropriate name, the light independent reaction, also require the metabolites, the products of the light reaction, which is working with the sun, but it's not directly need the sunlight. So you will see that the light reaction, they need the sun, they need the light, and the products of this reaction are basically going to charge the dark reactions. But because the dark reaction only occurs thanks to the products of the light reaction, and the light reaction is dependent on the sun, the dark reactions won't occur when there is no sun. They will always occur when there is sun as well. So this is a very, very high yield point for the exams. So the light reaction is basically when we take water and the product is oxygen. You will see that how we split water and what is the reaction in the next videos, but for now remember that we take water and this is where we get the oxygen itself. The products, the most important products of the light reactions are ATP and NADPH. NADPH is also an electron carrier, very similar to NADH, only with a phosphate group on it. Remember this molecule as the molecule in plants that is going to carry the electrons. And on the IMAT and BMAT exam, we saw several times that they try to confuse this molecule with NADH. So don't confuse them. When they give you this molecule in terms of respiration and the production of ATP, make sure you differentiate between NADPH and NADH when it comes to photosynthesis and cellular respiration in animal cells. So the products of the light reaction are going to be ATP and NADH. These products are going to drive and give energy to the dark reactions, or the light independent reaction, which is the more appropriate name. The dark reactions are also known as a Kelvin cycle. The Kelvin cycle is a metabolic pathway that basically going to allow us to build carbohydrates from carbon dioxide. So we are going to incorporate carbon dioxide with the molecules that are called PGAL or G3P, which is basically phosphoglyceraldehyde or glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, that we are going to see how it's going into the Kelvin cycle and take a part of it. And basically, part by part, you are going to, instead of in the Krebs cycle where you take carbon dioxide outside, we are going to incorporate carbon dioxide to the molecule. The incorporation of carbon dioxide into the molecule is basically going to build us carbohydrates, going to build us a lot of sugars that we can use. The sugars that we're going to get out of the photosynthesis are basically going to go and to store in usually in a form of starch, which is the storage of glucose, of carbohydrates inside plants. And then the cell itself, the plant itself, will be able to use it later when it needs. Now, another very important thing is that while we have this system inside a cell to create ATP and NADPH, we use it in order to create glucose. And we use the glucose eventually in metabolic pathways in the mitochondria in the plant cell that usually is there as well to create the vast amount of energy the plant cell needs, because plant cells are eukaryotic cells, which means they also have mitochondria in addition to the new organelles that we still didn't talk about that contain the following structures, the light and the dark reactions. It's very easy to forget that as eukaryotic cell you have the mitochondria, and we are going to use the glucose to form energy. So while we say they are autotrophs, it doesn't mean they can produce directly energy that fits and is enough for the entire cell. It means that you can create glucose from carbon dioxide, but then you're going to use the carbon dioxide in the mitochondria and not the carbon dioxide, the glucose in the mitochondria and in glycolysis and all the metabolic pathways that are required to yield the most amount of ATP. So make sure you don't forget the difference between animal and plant cell, but don't forget they both share the fact that you are going to break down glucose into the vast majorities through cellular respiration. So we are going to have mitochondria as well in plant cell. It's a very important point. So while we are basically going to spit out oxygen, the mitochondria is going to use oxygen. So we have the spit out of oxygen and the usage of oxygen in another part of the same cell. But don't forget it happens simultaneously basically. Unlike animal cell, which they can produce their own glucose, we need to consume glucose from the outside. Therefore, we are not autotrophs. I hope this video made sense, and I will see you next time.